The series begins with Michaela sitting with her family at Jamaica Airport, waiting for their flight back to New York after finishing their vacation. We learn that Michaela works as a police detective and that she was recently in an accident that killed her best friend. The incident still weighs heavily on her, which is why her mother keeps pushing her to marry her fiancé, Jared, as soon as possible, believing marriage will help her forget the tragedy and pull her out of her grief. Michaela's brother Ben is also at the airport with his wife Grace and their twins, Cal and Olive. We find out that Cal has leukemia and has been receiving treatment for a while. While they're sitting there, an announcement is made for a flight to New York with a 50% discount. Michaela takes the opportunity and decides to travel on that flight so she can have some time alone. Ben also decides to board the same flight with Michaela, taking Cal with him, while the rest of the family boards the original flight. Michaela, Ben, and Cal then board Flight 828, and the plane takes off with all passengers on board. Before reaching New York, the plane flies into a violent storm. It shakes uncontrollably, terrifying everyone on board and making them fear for their lives. But moments later, the plane breaks out of the storm and everything returns to normal. After some time, they land at New York Airport. As soon as the plane touches down, the passengers notice ambulances and police cars surrounding them. They are met by an NSA investigator named Vance, who informs them that their plane originally took off in April 2013 and then disappeared from radar. That means the plane has been missing for 5 years and 7 months. And during that time, the government declared every passenger on board dead because no trace of them was ever found, despite extensive searches. Vance begins questioning all the passengers, hoping that someone might have an explanation for what happened, especially since medical tests show that not a single passenger has aged even 1 day during those 5.5 years. But Vance is shocked to find that every passenger gives the exact same answer. Nothing unusual happened on the flight. After 36 hours of nonstop investigation, the passengers are finally released, and the news spreads everywhere. The entire city now knows about the return of Flight 828. Families rush to the airport, and Grace runs to Ben and Cal, hugging them tightly. But Grace is stunned. They haven't aged, while for her, 5 full years have passed. Ben also sees Olive, who has grown into a teenager. Their father arrives happily to welcome them, but he tells them that their mother passed away a year earlier. Michaela and Ben are devastated, unable to believe their mother is gone. They all return home exhausted from everything that happened. Meanwhile, specialists at the airport examine the plane, only to discover that nothing about it has changed, not a single part, confirming that the aircraft is exactly the same as the day it disappeared. The next day, Michaela goes back to the police precinct where she and her fiancé Jared used to work. She's already uneasy because Jared never showed up at the airport to greet her. When she sees him, she learns that he was promoted and is now handling a case on his own. Michaela is stunned when she spots a wedding ring on his hand and discovers that he married her friend Lourdes. Despite Jared trying to explain that he spent 3 years searching for her, Michaela is heartbroken. She walks away, unable to handle the shock. At the same time, Ben and Grace take Cal to the doctor who had been treating him, just to check on his condition and make sure he's okay. There, they learn that during the years Cal was missing, a cure for leukemia was discovered, which means Cal can now be treated and possibly recover completely from the disease. Ben and Grace are overwhelmed with joy at the news, happier than they've been in years. We then cut to Michaela, who is riding the bus back home when she suddenly hears a voice inside her head telling the bus driver to slow down. The voice grows louder and louder until Michaela can't ignore it anymore, and she yells at the driver, demanding that he stop immediately. He follows her instructions, and at that exact moment, a young boy runs across the street, chasing his ball. Michaela, along with everyone on the bus, is shocked. She has no idea how she knew the child would cross at that precise second. Meanwhile, we see another passenger from Flight 8828, a woman named Sanvi, who works as an oncologist. She returns to her job and is stunned to discover that the research project she created before she disappeared had been completed during the years she was gone, and it ended up helping to cure cancer. The next morning, Michaela is out jogging when she sees 2 dogs locked behind a metal fence. Once again, she hears the voice inside her head telling her to set them free. She ignores it and keeps running, but later that night the voice returns, louder than before. Michaela decides she must go free the dogs. When she gets there, she's shocked to find Ben already at the same place, and he admits that he's been hearing the same voice too. They immediately break the gate and free the dogs, and they both agree not to tell anyone about the voices they've been hearing, knowing that if the government found out, they would run endless tests and experiments on them. The next day, Jared sees surveillance footage of the dogs being freed read and is stunned to discover that Michaela was the one who did it. He confronts her to get an explanation, but she refuses to tell him the truth. The day after, the police recover the dogs, and Jared brings Michaela with him to return them to their owner so she can apologize and avoid having charges pressed against her. But as soon as Michaela approaches the house, she hears the voice again, urging her to free the dogs. She finds the two dogs standing at a locked door, and she breaks the lock open. When the door swings open, Michaela is shocked to discover two kidnapped girls inside. The kidnapping case turns out to be the same case Jared has been working on, so he immediately arrests the abductor. Police units arrive shortly after, and everyone realizes Michaela just helped solve the case. Later, Michaela goes to church, trying to calm her nerves and find some explanation for what's happening to her. But she hears the voice again, this time telling her to go to the plane at the airport. Moments later, Ben appears. He heard the same voice too. They decide to go to the aircraft together, hoping to find answers. When they arrive, they're stunned to see that many other passengers from Flight 828 have gathered at the same spot, all because they heard the same calling. The group stands together facing the plane, trying to understand what is happening to them, when suddenly, without any warning, the plane explodes right in front of them. After the explosion, the 20 passengers who went to the plane site are taken in for questioning. Strangely, they all deny hearing any voices and claim they simply felt an urge to go to the airport without knowing why. After 10 hours of interrogation, Vance decides to release them. The next day, Ben and Grace are at Cal's treatment session, where they run into Sanvi and discover that she, too, was on Flight 828. And even more surprising, she is now personally supervising Cal's treatment. After the session, Ben is walking down the street when he suddenly hears a specific melody playing inside his head. He follows the sound until he finds a man performing the same tune on the sidewalk. The man, named Rad, reveals that he was also on Flight 828. He tells Ben that before he traveled, his son Audio was just a little boy, but now he's 18 and currently in jail for robbery. Rad begs Ben to help him see his son in prison. Ben feels for him and calls Michaela, asking her to help them get access to the prison so Rad can visit Audio. She agrees, and the next day Ben and Rad go to the prison. Rad speaks with his son and learns that Audio is innocent and was falsely accused of stealing jewelry from the store where he worked. Later, Ben goes home to find Grace bringing Cal a new toy since Olive had gotten rid of all his old toys during the years he was missing. But Cal gets upset. He wants his old things back. Olive then asks her father to go out for a walk with her. And during that walk, Ben discovers that Olive has been storing Cal's belongings in an off-site storage unit. He learns the unit belongs to Danny, Grace's friend, and Ben is shocked when he realizes Grace was involved with Danny during his disappearance. Olive tells him her mom ended things with Danny the moment Ben returned. While they're talking, Ben hears another sound in his head, this time a cell phone ringtone. He follows it and finds a young man inside the storage facility surrounded by a pile of jewelry. These items turn out to be the same ones Audio was accused of stealing. The man is actually the son of the shop owner, and he was the real thief. Ben tackles him to the ground and calls Michaela to come arrest him. Audio is then released from jail because his innocence is proven. The next day, Ben talks to Grace and tells her he knows she was with someone else during the years he was gone, but he forgives her and isn't angry. Meanwhile, we see another Flight 828 passenger, Kelly, who has been appearing on multiple TV shows, accusing the government of hiding important information and refusing to tell the passengers the truth about what happened to them. One night, while she's watching the news, an unknown intruder sneaks up behind her and kills her. Police arrive to investigate, and the news of her death spreads everywhere. Ben becomes terrified that her death might be connected to the passengers of Flight 828. Then, Ben receives a call from Sanvi. She tells him that an unusual type of protein showed up in Cal's blood test, a protein that only appeared after he returned from the flight. Ben and Sanvi decide to keep this information secret until they understand what it means. After that, Ben and Michaela go to Kelly's house, but they find Vance already there. He orders them to leave immediately. Michaela tries to speak with Kelly's husband and learns that he is convinced someone from the government killed his wife because she was constantly attacking government officials in the media. The next day, Ben and Michaela meet with Sanvi, who tells them she ran tests on herself and discovered she experienced something similar to a minor stroke, which means all of them may have gone through the same thing. But to confirm it, she needs brain tissue from someone who was on Flight 828. She explains that she thought of using Kelly's body, but was shocked to find out that Kelly's corpse never made it to the morgue. And when she tries to look up Kelly's records, her search gets blocked. Elsewhere, a group of police officers is seen transporting Kelly's body to an unknown location. The next day, Sanvi heads to meet a neurologist colleague at the hospital when she suddenly sees a strange ghost-like figure in the hallway. She even sees its footprints on the floor. Terrified, she looks again, but the figure disappears instantly. Sanvi meets the doctor and shows him a brain scan, pretending it belongs to a friend. She asks for his professional opinion. He tells her the person in the scan shows early signs of schizophrenia. He also mentions another patient in room 810 suffering from similar symptoms. Sanvi decides to check out the room herself. As soon as she approaches the door, a man named Thomas bursts out, terrified and shaking, and tells her that Bethany, one of the flight attendants from Flight 828, is responsible. Before he can say anything more, several nurses grab him, sedate him, and take him back into the room. Sanvi immediately calls Ben, who rushes to the hospital, and she tells him everything that happened. Ben suggests that she confront Bethany, since she might be connected to everything happening to the passengers. Meanwhile, Michaela is out on a police assignment and sees the exact same ghostly figure Sanvi saw earlier. Later, Sanvi goes to Bethany and tells her what she heard from Thomas. Bethany finally opens up. She explains that Thomas is the friend of her cousin Leo. Thomas had been persecuted by authorities in Jamaica because of his political beliefs, so Leo begged her to help smuggle him into the United States. Bethany agreed and disguised Thomas as a flight attendant, sneaking him onto the plane through the cargo area so his name wouldn't appear on the passenger manifest, preventing him from being arrested. But when Daly, the pilot, told her the plane was diverting and that the airport they were landing in would be full of law enforcement, Bethany panicked. She went to Thomas, gave him cash and a phone, and told him that as soon as they landed, he needed to run. After hearing the story, Sanvi sympathizes with Thomas and tells Bethany they need to find a way to help him. At the same time, Michaela calls Ben and tells him about the ghost she saw. She explains that because she was distracted by the vision, she ruined her assignment, and Jared ended up taking the blame alone, and now he might get fired because of her. Ben tells her she needs to talk to Sanvi since she saw the same figure. That night, Sanvi and Bethany head to the hospital to break Thomas out, only to discover that he has already escaped. At the same time, Vance is also at the hospital, having learned that Thomas was on Flight 828 and entered the country illegally. He is there to arrest him. Sanvi and Bethany quickly slip away before Vance can spot them. As soon as they exit the hospital, they run into Michaela, who came there to meet Sanvi. When she learns what happened, she immediately loads them into her car and drives them away before Vance or his agents can catch them. Michaela and Sanvi then start trying to piece together the mystery of the ghostly figure they've both been seeing. Based on their description, Bethany tells them there's a statue in the city that looks exactly like the apparition. The three of them rush there and are shocked to find Thomas sitting beneath the statue. Thomas explains that he and Bethany's cousin, Leo, planned that this spot would be their meeting place once he arrived in America. But Thomas is devastated when he learns that 5.5 years have passed and that Leo died in an accident 2 years ago. Michaela takes them all to a safe location where Thomas can hide from Vance. Afterward, she meets up with her brother Ben and tells him everything that happened. But she's surprised when Ben disagrees with her actions. He insists they should turn Thomas in to law enforcement and stop putting their lives at risk. The next day, Vance is in his office when one of his agents walks in and informs him that Bethany was seen at the hospital the night Thomas escaped. Vance immediately concludes that she helped Thomas flee and issues an order to arrest her. Meanwhile, Ben is at home and decides to take Cal out for pizza. While they're eating, Ben hears a voice in his head repeating the phrase, "Everything is connected." He ignores it and continues enjoying the evening with his son. At the end of the night, Ben and Cal board the subway to head home. As soon as the doors open at the next stop, Cal suddenly jumps off the train and runs. Ben panics and chases after him, asking where he's going. Cal turns back to him and calmly tells him to keep following. Everything is connected. Ben keeps chasing him until he sees Cal crawl through an air duct opening. Terrified for his safety, Ben follows him through the ventilation shaft. Cal emerges inside the same hidden room where Thomas is hiding. He stands in front of Thomas and calls him by name. Ben is stunned when he arrives and sees this. He asks Cal how he knew where Thomas was and how he even knew his name, but Cal simply says he doesn't know how. It just came to him. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door. Ben panics and tells Thomas to run, but Cal calmly says the person outside is a friend. Confused, Ben opens the door and finds Georgia, Bethany's friend. She introduces herself and tells them Bethany has been arrested. She came to take Thomas somewhere safer to hide. We then flash back to Cal on the plane. All the other passengers were asleep except him, and he saw a bright, blinding light outside the window. As he stared at it, he whispered the phrase, "Everything is connected." Meanwhile, another passenger who spoke an unfamiliar language had been wandering the aisle looking for someone to help him fill out his customs form. No one could understand him until he finally found a woman on the plane who spoke his language, and he went to speak with her. We return to the present, where Ben and Grace wake up to Cal screaming in agony. They rush to him and find him burning with a dangerously high fever, mumbling words in a language they can't understand. Cal is terrified and begs them to help him and to keep him away from the red door. They immediately drive him to the hospital. The doctor examining him can't find any medical explanation for his symptoms, but she gives him medication to bring the fever down while his condition stabilizes. Sanvi is with her the entire time. As soon as the doctor steps out, Cal starts repeating the same strange words again. Sanvi suddenly remembers hearing that exact language on the plane, spoken by the man who was asking passengers for help. Michaela arrives and learns what's going on. They all decide they need to find information about the man who spoke that language on the flight. They discover his name, Marco from Bulgaria, but they can't uncover any other details. Sanvi then remembers the only person who understood Marco on the plane, the woman who helped him fill out his customs form. They find her name, Anna, a translator. Michaela goes to meet her. Anna explains that the word Cal keeps saying means, "Help me." She also tells Michaela that as soon as Marco arrived at the airport, he boarded a bus that headed to a shelter because he had no relatives in the United States. Michaela takes Anna to the police station to check airport transport logs. There, she learns that 4 buses were officially recorded leaving the airport with passengers from the flight. But Anna insists there were 5 buses, not 4, and Marco boarded the 5th one. That 5th bus was specifically assigned to passengers who had no family in the country. Michaela immediately understands. The government kidnapped these passengers, specifically choosing people who had no one to look for them. Back at the hospital, Cal continues screaming and begging for help. In another location, Marco is shown strapped inside a laboratory, undergoing painful experiments. He screams in agony, repeating the exact same words Cal is saying in the hospital. Michaela and Ben manage to trace the path of the missing 5th bus and determine its final destination. Michaela decides to go there, but first she meets with Jared, explains everything, and asks him to go with her. Jared agrees. When they arrive, they find the facility heavily guarded with armed security. An officer starts approaching them, so Michaela quickly punctures their car's tire to make it look like they had a roadside emergency. The guard stays with them while the tire is changed and eventually lets them go. As they drive away, they pass a red door, the same one Cal kept talking about, with a patient standing outside accompanied by 2 medical staff members. Michaela discreetly snaps photos of everything. She sends the pictures to Ben, who rushes to Vance, shows him the images, and begs him to raid the facility and find who is behind the abductions. But Vance says the photos are not enough evidence to authorize an operation on a government-owned site. Still, he promises Ben that he will investigate and will contact him once he uncovers something. Back at the police station, Michaela and Jared confirm the truth. The place they visited is a farm owned by a powerful government-linked corporation, proving beyond a doubt that the government is behind everything. Back at the hospital, Cal's condition suddenly begins to improve, and within moments he returns to normal. This happens because the people experimenting on Marco abruptly shut down everything they were doing. They receive information that someone from the NSA is closing in on them, so they pack up and flee the facility immediately. A short time later, Vance arrives at the same underground lab, but he finds it completely abandoned. By chance, he spots a discarded medical bandage stained with blood on the floor. That's enough for him to realize Ben was telling the truth. Something serious is happening, and someone is working hard to cover it up. Elsewhere, the doctor in charge of the secret lab notifies someone that they have moved locations and will begin setting up the facility again to resume the experiments. The next morning, Cal wakes up in the hospital and tells his father he's scared. He can still feel Marco again. Ben comforts him and promises everything will be over soon. Later, Ben applies for an accounting job at the same corporation connected to the Flight 828 kidnappings. Thanks to his strong qualifications, he is hired. On his first day, day, he meets his supervisor, Ronnie, who is impressed by Ben and already knows he's one of the Flight 828 passengers. Ronnie admits he's been following all the news about him. Ben secretly uses the opportunity to take Ronnie's access badge and enters the company's internal database. While searching, he spots a photo of a researcher named Fiona, another Flight 828 passenger who specializes in neural cell studies. Ben becomes suspicious that Fiona might be involved in everything happening. Ben takes Sanvi and goes to confront Fiona at her workplace. When he shows her that her name is listed inside the company's research system, Fiona explains that after returning from the flight, the company offered to fund her new project called Singularity, and she accepted. She gave them her research data, but claims she has no idea what the company did with it after that. Determined to dig deeper, Ben decides to spend time with his coworkers and tries to find a way to access more classified files. He eventually befriends the company's IT manager, David. The next day, Ben visits David's office and accidentally spills coffee on him to force him out of the room. While David is gone, Ben quickly logs into the computer and manages to access the Singularity project folder. He copies all the files onto a flash drive and sends Sanvi a message telling her to meet him. But as Ben leaves the building, he finds security conducting a full search of all employees. Panicking, he doesn't know what to do until he receives a text message from an unknown number telling him to step out of the line and move left immediately. Ben follows the instructions and is shocked to find Vance waiting for him outside. Vance reveals that he hacked Ben's phone and has been monitoring everything he's been doing. He demands Ben hand over the flash drive, threatening to arrest him for corporate espionage if he refuses. Ben has no choice but to give it to him. The next day at the company, Ben is surprised when the entire building is suddenly evacuated due to a fire alarm. As he walks out, he notices a disguised Vance slipping away from the crowd. Ben realizes Vance must have infiltrated the company and triggered the alarm on purpose. Ben follows him to a secluded spot where Vance grabs Ben's phone and smashes it so no one can trace their conversation. They sit down at a nearby cafe, and Vance tells Ben that he finally believes him. Someone inside the government is behind everything. Vance gives Ben a laptop containing the data he extracted from the company, along with a secure, hack-proof phone. He asks Ben to help him analyze everything on the computer. The next day, Ben studies the files and calls Fiona to tell her what he discovered. Fiona explains that the information suggests they're running an experiment designed to electronically replicate the callings, the voices, inside the passengers' minds. She warns Ben that the experiment is extremely dangerous and could kill the people being tested on. Ben then meets with Vance, and together they plan to have Fiona plant a listening device inside the office of the Singularity Project's director. Fiona goes to the facility, meets the director, a man named Lawrence, and manages to install the bug without being noticed. Through the device, Ben, Vance, and Michaela hear Lawrence speaking to his superior, a man referred to as the Major. Lawrence tells him that he has already relocated the lab to a site in Brooklyn. After running a search, Ben, Vance, and Michaela manage to pinpoint the exact building. Ben insists they storm the facility immediately, but Vance stops him. They need more information first. Otherwise, they're walking into a trap. The next day, Ben is standing outside his house when a woman approaches him calling his name. She's barely able to walk, and she collapses into his arms. Her name is Cox, and she reveals she was one of the 11 kidnapped passengers who were experimented on. She tells Ben she escaped while the lab was being moved and that she heard a calling telling her to go to him. She followed it until she found herself at his house without even realizing how she got there. Ben takes her to a hidden safe location where Vance, Sanvi, and Fiona are waiting. Cox describes everything she went through. Vance asks Ben to explain what's happening, and Ben tells him that all the passengers have been hearing mysterious voices in their minds. Fiona adds that the company weaponized her research in unethical ways to try and control human neurological responses through brain cell manipulation. Meanwhile, at the relocated lab, Lawrence orders the doctors to increase the intensity of the experiment to save time. As soon as the test begins, Cal experiences unbearable pain, and Michaela, Ben, Sanvi, and Cox all collapse with severe symptoms. Vance is horrified by what he's witnessing, but then the doctors stop the experiment and everyone returns to normal. Ben calls Olive to check on Cal. She tells him Cal is in his room drawing and seems okay, but Cal is actually bleeding from his nose, dripping blood onto the paper he's sketching on. At that moment, Vance announces that he's launching an immediate assault on the lab. A short time later, Vance, Ben, Michaela, Jared, and Fiona, along with a team of armed soldiers, raid the new facility. But once again, it's empty. Suddenly, Cal appears and calls out to his father, telling him they're still here. Ben and the others are stunned. They have no idea how Cal found them or how he even knew the location of the lab. But Cal shows them his drawing, a detailed sketch of the area, including a specific spot marked between two trees. He tells them that's where the others are. Ben hands the drawing to Vance, and the team searches the entire area until they find a hidden door built into a wall. They open it and step inside. They find themselves inside an underground tunnel, and by chance, they catch one of the guards coming out of the lab door. A gunfight breaks out immediately. As soon as Lawrence and his medical team hear the gunfire, they panic, gather their equipment, and Lawrence destroys the lab systems before fleeing the facility. Ben and the group split into two teams. Ben and Fiona go deeper into the lab to rescue the kidnapped passengers. Vance and Jared pursue Lawrence and the doctors. Fiona attempts to shut down the lab machines, but the systems overload and explode, setting the entire place on fire. Ben and Fiona manage to rescue the captives and rush them into a car, speeding away from the burning lab. At the same time, Jared and Vance catch up to Lawrence and his team. They arrest them, but suddenly the entire underground structure explodes before they can get out. Michaela runs toward the blast site in panic, calling out for Jared. She finds him lying on the ground, injured but alive. Jared is rushed to the hospital, and Michaela stays with him, terrified for his safety. The police chief arrives and delivers devastating news. Vance died in the explosion. Later, Jared regains consciousness and his condition improves slightly. Meanwhile, in the secret hideout, it's revealed that Cox has hidden a cell phone strapped to her leg. She secretly uses it to send a message to someone, asking, "What's the next step?" We return to a flashback showing Lawrence and Cox planning a mission. Lawrence instructs her to approach Ben, find out what he knows, who is helping him, and why he's investigating them. Afterward, Fiona gathers all the passengers who showed up at the airport the night the plane exploded and asks if any of them have seen or heard strange things lately. Captain Daly, the pilot, clearly doesn't like Fiona's questions. He pulls Ben aside and tells him he believes Fiona is behind everything because she conducts extensive experiments on human neural cells. Ben tries to explain that Fiona helped save the kidnapped passengers, but Daly refuses to believe him and walks away. Later, Ben confronts Cox and asks if she knows anyone called the Major. Cox tells him the Major is a woman, and she overheard Lawrence speaking to her on the phone, receiving direct orders. Ben goes to Fiona and Michaela and tells them what he learned. Suddenly, Michaela sees another vision, a violent storm and a figure wearing a red jacket. The next day, Ben receives a call from Daly asking him to meet urgently. Daly takes him to a meteorologist named Roger. Ben learns that Roger was on duty the night the mysterious storm engulfed Flight 828. Roger reveals a shocking truth. The storm wasn't natural. It was artificial, created by a group of scientists. He tells Ben he was the only one who figured it out at the time, and as a result, he was forced to resign. He was also threatened with death if he ever spoke about it. When Roger discovered what was happening to the passengers, he felt obligated to help, so he gives Ben a flash drive containing everything he uncovered. Daly then takes Ben to the airport. They enter the flight simulator and input the weather data they got from Roger. Ben and Daly are stunned when they find themselves inside the exact same storm from the day of the incident. But before the simulation can continue, the entire system shuts down abruptly, ending the test. This confirms for Ben and Daly that the government was conducting an experiment on them during the flight. Daly asks Ben to find out from Fiona what really happened inside the storm, because he suspects Fiona may have been involved in the government's experiment. Ben calls Michaela to tell her what he discovered, and we see Cox quietly eavesdropping on the conversation. The next day, Michaela discovers that Roger, the meteorologist, has been killed. She immediately informs Ben, warning him to be extremely careful because someone clearly knows he uncovered classified information, and that means he's in danger. Worried about Daly, Ben and Michaela go to his house to check on him. He isn't there, but they find that he had been studying weather patterns and learned that another storm, identical to the one from the day of the flight, is forming. They realize Daly plans to fly into the storm again to uncover the truth about what happened. Meanwhile, Daly is already at the airport. He steals a plane and takes off, with Fiona forcibly taken on board. He demands Fiona tell him what happened inside the storm before. Ben and Michaela arrive at the airport and contact Daly over radio, begging him to stop before it's too late. But Daly refuses and continues flying toward the storm. Suddenly, fighter jets appear and fire at Daly's plane while it is inside the storm. Ben is devastated. He mourns Daly and Fiona, furious that someone keeps reporting their movements to the government. Michaela immediately suspects Cox. She was present when Ben mentioned Roger's name. At that same moment, Grace enters Cal's room and discovers he's missing. She panics, terrified that something terrible happened to him. Ben and Michaela arrive home and speak privately with Grace. They tell her not to call the police yet. They need freedom to search for Cal without government interference. Grace is is confused, so Ben explains everything. Cal has special abilities and can predict events before they happen through his drawings. Ben takes Cal's sketchbook and begins showing Grace each drawing. They are shocked to find a drawing of Ben and Michaela holding the sketchbook exactly the way they are doing right now. Then they find another drawing, Cal sitting in a specific room. They flip through the rest and discover multiple sketches that look like maps of the place where Cal might be. But they notice a page torn out. Grace recognizes one of the places Cal drew and finally believes them. She agrees not to call the police. Meanwhile, Michaela takes Cox to the precinct for questioning. She discovers that Cox has a daughter, and she hasn't known where her daughter is since the day she returned from the flight. The major promised Cox she would help her find her daughter in exchange for information. Cox admits she told the major about Cal's abilities. Michaela realizes the major must be the one who kidnapped Cal. Desperate, Michaela offers Cox a deal. She will help Cox find her daughter if Cox tells them where Cal is. A short time later, Michaela gives Cox a file containing everything they have on her missing daughter. Cox, in return, hands over the torn page from Cal's sketchbook. The missing page shows a drawing of Cox and her daughter together, and on the back, a sketch of a house deep in the woods. Ben and Grace head to the location Cal drew and begin searching according to the landmarks in his sketches. Michaela then sends Grace a message that includes the drawing of the cabin in the woods. Ben and Grace rush there immediately, enter the cabin, and are shocked to see Cal sitting inside, alone. Cal tells them he came here by himself and that he's waiting for someone who is about to arrive. Suddenly, a man named Zeke stumbles through the door and collapses unconscious. Moments later, Michaela arrives at the cabin just as Zeke regains consciousness. He is stunned to see Michaela alive. Everyone is confused by his reaction, and Michaela suddenly realizes that Zeke is the man she kept seeing in her storm visions. Zeke begins to tell them what happened to him. He was hiking in the mountains when a violent blizzard hit. He hid inside a cave and used a magazine to start small fires to keep warm. But when he found Michaela's picture inside the magazine, he couldn't burn it. Suddenly, an avalanche trapped him under ice. He couldn't move at all. And then, without warning, the ice shifted and released him, allowing him to escape and follow a strange instinct leading him to the cabin. Ben picks up the magazine page Zeke kept and notices the date. He realizes Zeke disappeared a full year ago, but Zeke believed he had only been gone for a day or two at most. Ben concludes that Zeke experienced the same supernatural phenomenon the passengers experienced on Flight 828. The next day, Sanvi examines Cal to make sure he's okay. Ben also gives her a blood sample from Zeke. After running tests, Sanvi tells Ben that Zeke's results are identical to the passenger's results, meaning he went through the same event. She explains that a storm hit the cave exactly at the time Zeke disappeared. Michaela decides to take Zeke back to her apartment to stay with her. There, she learns his tragic story. Years ago, Zeke and his sister visited that same cave, and Zeke accidentally caused the incident that led to her death. Ever since, he has returned to the cave every year to honor her memory. That night, Zeke hears a strange noise at the door. When he opens it, a wolf lunges at him, then suddenly vanishes. At the same moment, Ben and Grace wake up to Cal screaming. He warns them that danger is coming. It becomes clear that Cal saw the same wolf attacking Zeke in his dream. The next day, the police chief assigns Jared and Michaela to guard a site near the river where an armored truck sank 3 days earlier. The truck belonged to a gang of criminals who stole a massive amount of money. Meanwhile, the major arrives in New York and meets with Jace. She learns everything that happened recently. Her plan becomes clear. She intends to weaponize the callings, the supernatural experiences, and turn the Flight 828 passengers into assets for war. She orders Jace to track Cal, as he is the strongest and most gifted among all passengers. That night, Zeke is at Ben and Grace's house with them, and Cal. Suddenly, Cal begins drawing Michaela at the river, opening a door and being attacked by the wolf. At that exact moment, Michaela is at the river as divers pull the armored truck out of the water. She walks toward it, opens the door, and is stunned to find the driver, Griffin, still alive. Griffin is rushed to the hospital, and Sanvi examines him. She is shocked. Griffin survived underwater for 3.5 days with no brain damage, no water in his lungs, and normal oxygen levels, as if he hadn't been in the river at all. Sanvi discovers that the exact amount of time Griffin spent underwater was 52 hours and 8 minutes, 5208, which equals 828, the same number as their flight. Suddenly, Griffin screams in terror, warning that an explosion will happen soon and many people will die. Michaela tries to get details from him, but the doctors sedate him before he can say anything more. Later, Michaela, Ben, Sanvi, and Zeke meet to discuss the situation. Michaela explains that Griffin is an extremely dangerous criminal with a long record. Sanvi decides she must run a blood analysis on him to learn more. Michaela and Zeke head off to gather more information, where they encounter Jared. He is visibly shocked and jealous when he learns Zeke is living with Michaela. A short while later, Griffin wakes up and Michaela questions him. She realizes he came back from the dead just like they did. She tells him he must be hearing callings too and begs him to reveal where the bomb will explode so she can save innocent lives. But Griffin refuses to say a word unless he receives full immunity for all his crimes. The next day, Ben meets Sanvi and learns that Griffin's blood work shows the same anomalous markers as theirs. But Ben notices Sanvi acting nervous and unstable. She brushes it off, claiming she's just exhausted from work. Meanwhile, Griffin is transferred to the police station. There, he is officially given complete immunity for every crime he ever committed. Only then does he reveal the location of the bomb. Michaela and Jared rush to the spot, find the explosive device exactly where Griffin said it would be, and bomb technicians successfully disable it.